Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities April informational webinar. The title of our webinar today is Mental Health and Wellness, Meeting the Needs of Students in Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Programs. My name is Drew Andrews, and I'm the Assistant Director and Technical Assistance Coordinator at the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities. Our presenter today is Dr. Deborah Reed, Program Director in Exceptional Student Education and Deaf Education, Associate Instructor and Faculty in Residence at the University of North Florida. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our website under the Events tab for your review at a later date or for you to share with someone who's unable to attend today. The PowerPoint and other handouts can be downloaded from the chat section of your Zoom window, which can be accessed by clicking the chat icon, which looks like a speech bubble down at the bottom of your window. So if you take your cursor and just move it to the bottom of the window that you're looking at Zoom, you'll see a little icon that says chat. And if you click on that, and a chat box will open, usually over to the right, and we'll be posting the documents in there in just a few moments for you, a PowerPoint and some additional documents. If you have any difficulty hearing the presentation, the phone numbers have also been put into the chat box where you can call in on your phone. At the end of the webinar, you will be directed to our evaluation, so please complete. So we will have your input when planning future webinars. And this time we're going to see if we can get connected. Please bear with us for just a minute while we try to figure out what's going on. Dr. Reed and I did a run through on this the end of last week and everything worked fine, but for some reason we're having a little bit of trouble with her showing her screen. Okay, Dr. Reed, how about now? We can see that you're sharing your screen.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, so are you able to see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, so is it okay with you if we go forward without seeing my face?
That will be fine. I'm sorry that your camera's not working, but that will be fine.
I don't know. It shows on my end that my video camera is on. I really have no idea why it's not working. So I apologize for that, my goodness. So if this works for everybody, I can do it this way. All right. Well, goodness. I apologize for not being able to see everyone. I wish I could. And thank you so much for inviting me to have this conversation with you today. Mental health and wellness is certainly a topic that is near and dear to my heart. Let me give you just a little bit of quick background information on myself and some of my experience and why this is important to me. So when I was putting this together, I kind of looked at this from multiple lenses that I bring to this presentation. One, as an educator. I'm a faculty at the University of North Florida. I think Drew probably mentioned that, in the special education department. I'm also, early on in my career, I was a job coach, vocational rehab counselor, a teacher, Medicaid waiver support coordinator, and I worked many, many years with persons with disabilities. And I certainly, in those years, saw many challenges arise with individuals that I worked with with their mental health. But really back in those days, did not have a lot of background knowledge or experience and even what to do with those challenges. And then, in addition to that, after I got married and had children, from a personal experience, one of my children has bipolar disorder. Later on, had an adult child in college with some addiction issues. So I've also kind of put this together with the lens of a parent of children who have experienced mental health issues. And so I personally have experienced the challenges along the way of, what it means to advocate from that aspect and with that lens as well. So a lot of experience in many different realms. So I just wanted to kind of preface this with, I've worn many hats when it comes to mental health. And hopefully, as we go through this, I think you'll, hopefully gain some knowledge here. And certainly, as we leave here today, I am open and willing to answer any questions. Feel free to email me anytime you want with any questions. Always open to that. And you'll have to forgive me. Several months ago, I had vocal cord surgery, so if I sound kind of scratchy, that's why, and I apologize for that. So if you hear me pause, it's because I'm taking a sip of water. So moving on, what I would like to cover today. The first item here, just a very quick overview of the state of mental health. Two, just a few behaviors and symptoms that I think it's important for people in this field need to be aware of that might need further attention. And number three, things that I think that should be addressed in mental health, that addressing the mental health needs in post-secondary education. So with that probably will be the biggest focus today as far as strategies. And the way I formed that in this presentation is starting with some of the bigger formal type of thing, leading to informal strategies, and then some specific individual strategies that hopefully you can use in your programs or institutions and when working with individuals. Okay. So the state of mental health in America. So as you all know, we have a pretty big problem in our country today. Approximately 18% of adults right now have a mental health condition, and of those 18%, about 24 million currently go untreated, and there's a lot of reasons for that. The rates of suicide, ideation, and depressive episodes, especially in youth, we're really starting to see an increase in that, which is very frightening. We see a lot of effects right now on a lot of trauma in children. And one of the biggest challenges with that right now is we know that when children have trauma in their background, it causes permanent changes in the chemical activities in their brain. And when that happens, it puts them at risk for developing mental health disorders throughout their lifetime. So one of the biggest, when we see this, and we're talking about things, not only sexual abuse or witnessing traumatic events when they're younger, experiencing traumatic events, death of family members, could be a number of things. So all of those events that are happening in their lives as children when they move on to adulthood, and in your cases for some of the young people and adults that you are currently working with, if things have happened in their history as a child and you're seeing with them now, they might not be experiencing the effects of that trauma until you see them, and that could be happening. One of the things that I did not mention when I first came on is I also have a private practice now as a mental health counselor, and I see that a lot. So I see adolescents and a lot of 20-year-olds who experience trauma at a young age, and a lot of anxiety and depression kind of manifests itself in the 20s, the early 20s, when they're in college, and as a result of a lot of that traumatic background that comes out. So sometimes when they're in the college age, and whether it's in a college experience program like a lot of you are working in, or if it's in a post-secondary education program or whatnot, we see a lot of things come out in that time. So when we look at the state of mental health on specifically on college campuses, and I wanted to share this information because I think it's kind of a snapshot for us of what's going on in a specific environment. About 40% of students fail to seek help. 80% feel very overwhelmed by student responsibilities. 50% are saying that they experience a great amount of anxiety and struggle in school. 30% are reporting problems with schoolwork due to a mental health issue. 50% of students are rating their mental health below average or poor. And I think, a lot of this, if you look at, going back to number one bullet, for example, 40% are failing to seek help. Well, in our country, there's still a big stigma around mental health, and we're still afraid to talk about it. And it's something that a lot of people keep to themselves. That's kind of a societal thing, and I think we're doing a better job of talking about it, but it's still one of those things that students are afraid to talk about. There's a lot of pressure on kids, and I think that last bullet point here kind of, is very telling, that only 7% of parents reported that their students suffer from some type of mental health issues in college. So, the students are reporting a much higher percentage of things that are troubling them, and yet the parents are not even aware of that. So those are some pretty telling percentages right there. So, what as you're working with the post-secondary age students in your various settings, I know, this is a really hard question, or a hard, thing for many of you, especially for those that are not licensed professionals. So, that's a question I always hear. And even for myself, my full-time job is as faculty in education, and I work with college-age students. And yes, I have a private practice and I am a licensed professional, but that's a separate job. So I have to be very careful with my boundaries. And even I ask, what do I look for when I see some things, with my college students, and what do I need to be aware of, and what kind of signs and things should stand out to me as possibly needing further attention. So I kind of highlighted a couple of different slides here of things that I think are really important, that they seem like, in a way, a common sense, but These next two slides are very, the two, depression and anxiety, I think, are two areas that we see a lot of. The two highlighted areas right now, depression and anxiety in college students, that are really highlighted in two areas that, for that age group, that I would really probably say are two of the biggest areas that need a lot of attention. So if you start to notice any of the students you are working with who have that persistent feeling of sadness or being sad, and I'm not talking about just a day here and there where some kind of event happened and, you know, they're sad. I think we all have those days, right? But this is an ongoing, you just notice that it's an ongoing kind of something that you notice, and they're very disconnected from their feelings a little more than you're used to seeing them being. So there's a level of hopelessness and apathy there, a lack of interest in what they would normally be interested in, more difficulty focusing, and, you know, maybe more than they used to be, feelings of being, you know, of guilt, having trouble sleeping, not getting out of bed or not wanting to get out of bed, some physical symptoms that they've not had before, feelings of being very overwhelmed. And these things are starting to have an impact on their life activities, their educational experiences, their friendships, their work experiences, anything that they're doing in that post-secondary experience that is going to have an impact on their outcomes that you're working with them on. So, and again, it's not, you know, everyone's going to have a bad day. So, and usually if your gut is telling you there's something going on, it's probably, you know, follow your feeling, and maybe it needs a little more attention than, you know, you want to follow up on that. Signs of anxiety that need further attention. When you start to see more procrastination and avoidance than might be typical of a student that age, changes in sleeping habits, changes in eating habits. Sometimes we see people, it's not just not eating, but it could be eating more. Or poor eating habits, and people having headaches or muscle pain or shortness of breath, almost like see a lot of people with anxiety who have panic attacks, for example. When people start to socially isolate, if they've not been like that before, that could be a sign of anxiety, or things don't make them happy anymore, and what would normally have made them happy or pleasurable or not, or they start adopting some unhealthy coping behaviors. They're stressed, or they start talking about being very stressed and apprehensive. That's often a sign of anxiety and could very well need further attention. Some other common mental health issues would be, just listed a few here that are in addition to depression and anxiety. We often, for this age group, see addiction, eating disorders, thoughts or talk of suicide, self-harm, struggles with identity, bullying, bipolar disorder, and then post-traumatic stress disorder, and possibly trauma. So when we look at those are some of just the things to be aware of that possibly need to be addressed further. And again, I wanted to kind of start broadly and then talk a little bit more about some of the individual strategies that you could do. But broadly speaking, as we talk about how to address the needs of the post-secondary students. So I don't know how many of you, like I know a lot of students are having the college experiences on campus, and certainly a lot of most of the colleges have the counseling centers. So having access to those counseling centers, certainly, if they have access to those, that is a wealth of information. And if they can get services through the counseling centers, that's a definite positive and plus there. Private practices is also certainly benefit as well. And I'm going to mention a few things on the next slide about that, just for people to know and to be aware of when you find that you need that more formal service for someone. Just something that I have found being a provider now that I think might be helpful information. So referring someone for individual and group therapy, I think, is a very positive experience for some people if you find that they need something more than what you have been able to provide them in your individual programs. And encouraging even families and individuals to participate in counselor-led seminars and workshops is I think a really positive experience for a lot of different people. So if you are referring someone to a private practice or something, I kind of listed some challenges here of things that I have either experienced or just to be aware of. We know there's sometimes waiting list, and insurance can often be an issue, and the whole not accepting new clients and the stigma and a lot of things. But one of the things that I have found, and just being in this field, there are a lot of practitioners out there that do private pay. And there are a lot of them have the sliding scale, and if you ask them, they will provide services if they are a private pay provider, and you would be surprised at the number of people that will take clients at either no cost or for a very low cost. So you can find many of them on Psychology Today. So that is definitely something that I would encourage people to reach out to. Also, within their description on Psychology Today, I think it's really important to take a look at the, when you look at what their specialty areas are. It's really important to find somebody when you're talking about providing counseling services to people with unique abilities, that you find someone who understands and can work with someone who has unique abilities, because not everyone has a good understanding and knowledge and background, but there are some people who do and has some great knowledge and experience in doing that. They are out there, but you have to look. And so when you go to Psychology Today, people should be providing that background information on their profile. So that is often a place where I recommend for people to go and kind of look to help them find an individual who has that exact experience that they're looking for. It's interesting, when I was a Medicaid waiver provider, I used to run I was an executive director for a while of a supported employment and supported living agency. And I remember having the hardest time finding a mental health counselor for some of our clients because a lot of the providers felt that because the clients that we were working with had a certain IQ, that they would deem them too low to be of benefit for services. And I just found that to be just terrible. And so we had to really look hard for someone who would work with some of the young adults that we had who, would take the clients that we had, and you know what, they did benefit from services. So there's a lot of challenges out there, and I think that it needs to change. And I think you'll find some people out there that do work with people with a wide range of abilities, but you do have to look. So the counseling centers on campus, I just, wanted to share too, when we're talking about stigma, that there's a lot of things that they provide. It's not, a lot of people think, that stigma is, oh, if you go to a counseling center, then, it's therapy. It's much more than just therapy. It's helping students adjust to, navigating life on campus. So they provide those services. They help students to develop strategies to cope with different kinds of life stressors. They provide educational programs, and if there are more intensive psychological concerns that are needed, they can provide referrals to outside agencies if needed. And the other important thing here too is for anyone who is on campus, they can also provide training and consultation to professionals and faculty that are working with post-secondary ed students and college students. If you feel like you need more training and education in a certain area, they can provide that to you too. So that's another benefit for counseling centers. Okay, so those are your more formal recommendations and things. So some of the more informal things that maybe your program and institutions could think about doing. I would say, just for me, it would be a commitment as a program or an agency to make a commitment to check in with all students regarding their wellness and their mental health, and what that looks like. That is something that I think all programs and organizations need to have some, that needs to be addressed. And I know for me personally, as a faculty member, every single class that I teach, I make it a point to, at the beginning of class, I do a check-in with all of my students, every single class. That's the very first thing that I do. And I do that before I start teaching, because to me, how are they going to learn unless I know that they're all they're all ready to go? And if something's going on, I need to know that, and I want to make sure they're all in a safe space for learning. So likewise, I would want to know that the post-secondary ed students that I'm working with are in a safe space and they're feeling okay before we embark on whatever it is, we're doing. So making that commitment is really important. We also have something that we just started doing, and I tell you, it's been really interesting with the COVID-19 going on, this self-care module has really kind of taken off even more so. We started talking about building in self-care modules for all of our courses. Not everyone was doing it, but we now are making this a regular part of all of our courses now, especially with the COVID-19 going on. And I think this is something that we're going to be embedding into everything we do, because we're also seeing that, you know, and when you kind of go back to those statistics that I talked about, this is an ongoing issue, and it's a growing issue. And I see now with what's going on in our world with the virus too, that this has to be something we address. So even embedding something like this, if you have some type of, well, I'm sure we all do because of what's going on, some type of Canvas or Blackboard or whatever platform you're using, building in some type of module that your students can access on a regular basis, that would be really helpful for them. Peer mentors are really good, so they're not only getting check-ins from you or professionals, but you know, their peers, and just to have someone to check in with every once in a while. I put in this next one, Scholars with Callers, because I'm really excited about this. This is something that a professor in the mental health counseling department at UNF, this is her brainchild, and I think it's the neatest thing ever. She created a program so faculty who go through and earn, it's a special counseling certificate. If they go through a 3-course certificate program, they are Scholars with Callers, and we're going to have a number of faculty on campus that have service dogs, not service dogs, I apologize for that. It will be dogs who are just going to be around campus with only certain faculty who've gone through these courses, and they're available just for students at a certain period of time during the day or on campus. The students can come and just be near and pet, just for comfort. So you know, there's a lot of different, like Pet Partners has different programs, maybe even looking into something like that, that you can build into your program is kind of a neat creative idea. And then this next one is a really very easy way to create a calming space for students. If you have a space, create an intentional space where students can just hang out and reflect, have time to just decompress, you know, do artwork. And I put a picture in here. Here's a space where this is actually in the counseling center at UNF, but you can do this anywhere in any of your campuses. Could be in any of the colleges, you know, College of Ed, wherever you all are. This one happens to have a recliner. The lighting is soft. They have a sound machine, relaxing machine, meditation cushions. This particular room has a biofeedback in it that is run by a professional. So obviously, you know, unless you had a professional in there doing that, but you don't need that. You could certainly set up a space like that for anyone, and it would be a great space for your post-secondary ed students to relax, a place for them to go when they're starting to feel overwhelmed. And that could be something that you could do that does not require a professional to prepare. Okay, so some of the strategies to Specifically, getting down to more of the specific strategies to address the mental health needs of post-secondary students. So some of the coping skills for students, breaking down, if you find that some of the tasks or things that I know one of the things that students are doing in post-secondary is preparing for employment. So if they're finding that some of the tasks are very overwhelming, breaking them down into more manageable tasks can help with that. Just something as simple as teaching your students to step out and walk away for a few minutes. It sounds so easy, but it is so helpful. And I want you to think about this. I mean, how many of us sometimes just need to do this? Sometimes you just need to step away and walk away from wherever you are, and they might just need time away and change of scenery. Teaching them to embrace challenges and see challenges as something positive. I think sometimes we tend to focus on challenges as a negative. So let's celebrate challenges as a positive. Build in daily calming practice rituals. So similar to what I do in my class every day, where I do daily check-ins. Sometimes I do this with my students. I'll come in and we'll do some type of calming practice ritual. Sometimes it involves doing breathing exercises. If I feel like if I come in and I see my students seem really stressed, we'll do breathing exercises together, or we'll go outside and we'll do some calming activities or something. But building those into the daily routine and teaching your students to do those on their own when they wake up in the morning is really helpful. So I have just some I wanted to share with you. So I find I shared a couple here that so these are some just individual things that I have found that I use these in my counseling practice for people of all ages. This works for people of all ages. I use this with my college students. I've used these with adults. I use these with myself. I've used these with my own kids. These really work. And when you read some of these on paper and when you see it on the slide, you might think, oh, they seem so simple. But I hear back from people how much they really work when they use them. So I want you to really try to embrace some of these and share some of these with your students, and maybe even try some of these with yourselves. So the first one here, this is just one on breathing. So the way I teach this is I first off, and it's funny that you have to teach people how to breathe, but it's amazing, you really do. So the way I teach this is I have my students, I'll tell them to sit up in their chair, and they have to put their feet on the floor, and they have to keep their back straight. And oftentimes I will have them close their eyes because that closing your eyes actually allows you to focus more on your breathing. So now I have, I use 4 counts here. You can substitute that with whatever count works best for you or your student. So the idea here is to breathe in 4 counts through your nose, and then they would hold 4 counts, keeping their mouth closed, They would breathe out for 4 counts with slightly pursed lips. So for younger kids, or for people who might not understand what pursed lips are, I will tell them to pretend like they're blowing through a straw, and then hold it for 4 counts after they've blown out, and then they repeat several times. So on the right, the picture you see there, that's actually the breathing app that is on the iWatch. So that works for some people as well. But for people who don't like to use the app, or they don't have an iWatch or whatnot, this is something that works really well for, it's kind of a foundation for, it's something people can do wherever they are. If they are finding themselves getting overwhelmed or anxious, stressed out, they can do this wherever they are in the moment, whether they're at work, whether they're in class, whether they're on campus, whether they're at home, and whether they're angry, anywhere. So this is a nice one to start with. And again, you can change the count. It doesn't have to be 4. It's whatever works for each individual. Okay. This next one is it's mindfulness. It's the stop. This is a very simple mindfulness activity. You hear a lot about mindfulness nowadays. So mindfulness is, basically it's an awareness, being present in the moment, being intentional. I want you to think about how many of you, I myself am very, very guilty of this, how many of us go through the day on autopilot, right? We are, just on the go, we go, 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 and next thing you know, it's lunchtime, or, how many of us skip through lunch, or we're eating lunch as we're on our way to another meeting. And, next thing you know, we don't even remember really what we did. So mindfulness is, a way to kind of stop and be aware and be intentional about what we're doing. So when we start to feel that anxiety or stress, this activity here is teaching students how to stop, bring their mind back to the present moment, take a breath. So deep breaths, you're slowing your breath down. This is where they can use that breath that you just taught them before, that you've taught them previously. So it's slowing their breath down. You want to teach them to observe and notice what they're feeling, thinking, and doing in that moment. And then they can proceed once they're feeling present and aware of what's going on in that moment. And they're going to go about in a very deliberate way, but with a mindful demeanor. So it's all about stopping, taking control with your breathing, noticing what you're doing, and going about in a deliberate way. Okay. This is one of my favorites. This one, I probably get the most positive response back from everybody. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Very simple. And the next slide is a little bit very similar, only a little bit of a twist on that, and you'll see that in a moment. But this strategy is super easy, excellent for anxiety, grounding, panicky kind of feeling. So the theory behind this is that when you are feeling very anxious, when a student is starting to panic, feeling overwhelmed, that their brain cannot multitask. The brain cannot do that. So when your brain starts to think about something really stressful, it kicks into gear and muscles start to tense up and that faster breathing kicks in, and it becomes a vicious cycle until it stops. So this is a way to help things slow down. So because it cannot multitask, you need for your brain to be thinking about something else. So what you can do is this, no matter where you are, you can look around and start naming things by color. So I just listed, the colors in order, it doesn't matter. So you can say, name 5 green objects. So you look around, if you happen to be outside, 5 green objects. So you could start saying, oh, I see a green tree, I see green grass, I see green, leaves, and so forth and so on. And then you name 4 blue objects. And so by the time you get down to 1, your brain is focusing on all those 4 things that it cannot have all that other stuff with the stressful, being overwhelmed, and the muscle tension and the faster breathing, because it's spending its time now trying to find the colors and the objects. So it's an excellent way to kind of de-escalate and bring a person away from all that anxiety and panic. So this is a great tool, a great strategy to use for students who are feeling that anxiety and being overwhelmed. And this is, again, very similar to that particular strategy, only you are having them use their senses. I think the color is a little bit easier to remember. Sometimes this one requires some thinking about the different senses, but this one works really well also for the same reasons. So instead of using color, you're using the senses. So you're going to look around and name 5 things that you see. And you can even go so far as to, touch 4 things that you feel, listen for 3 things that you hear, what are 2 things that you smell, and what is 1 thing that you can taste. Peppermints work really well for this one. So that, as we know, using your sensory input is really amazing for this. So the same theory works for this. So your brain is doing something else, so it cannot multitask, and it allows you to kind of eliminate some of that anxiety and panicky stuff that's going on. Okay, so another great strategy. Worry stones are something, I always have these with me. This is doesn't work for everyone, but I have these I bring these to my class. I have a couple of college students that love these, and I don't know what it is, but I have some students that love these, and I always have little things like this with me, and some students like them, some don't, but I have some that you can see the little indentations in there, and can relieve stress by keeping the sensory inputs busy, and it can be very calming. So believe it or not, I actually use one of these when I give presentations to large audiences. So I have one in my pocket all the time, and it kind of is like helps with nervous energy kind of thing. It can also help replace destructive coping methods like nail biting and scratching and things like that. They're great. You can order them on Amazon. I always have them with me when I'm working with students. So in general, and I think this is something that we probably preach into the choir here. We all are told that, eating nutritious meals, getting enough sleep and exercise, finding a hobby, journaling, and creative outlets are all very good things. And practicing that self-care is really important, and teaching our students to do this, putting the phone down, is great. Journaling, I wanted to just, I had, one last slide here on journaling, something that I started doing, and I thought this was, I attended a workshop recently, and I think it would be great for post-secondary ed students is something called photographic essays. And I started using this in some of my, for some of my assignments in class, in a class that I teach on communication. And it's really cool, telling a story through photographs and pictures. And it's really, really a neat way to capture people's feelings, and a different way of communication. So I started also using this as a way of sometimes capturing how people are feeling, and having them take a picture of how they're feeling, taking a picture of something. And I don't give them anything more but that. You can provide a prompt, or you can just have them do it free form. And it's an excellent way of, for people who are struggling to share their thoughts with words, or who struggle with talking about their feelings with words. Sometimes that's really hard. You might want to try that. And just kind of a neat way. And there's just shared some different ways on the slide here to how to do that through a collage, art, video, PowerPoint, gallery walk, or just sharing with you personally, how they're feeling, with an image. That's another way that you can do that. So, okay. So those are just some ideas and thoughts. And I know we're in some really challenging times right now with the COVID-19, and I'm sure all of you are, goodness, with everyone having to do the social distancing and being real creative in how we are working with all of our students. I'm sure this is very challenging for everyone. So I know when, when I started thinking about this wasn't going on. So I know it's very challenging, and I commend you all for what you're doing in the field. And I hope you are able to take some of what I shared today. And again, like I said, I certainly don't pretend to know everything, but I'd be happy and willing at any time to troubleshoot, or just, be willing to share ideas anytime you want. So feel free to send an email or give me a call. I'd be happy to talk.
Thank you, Debbie. That is great. And at this time, although we have, we're close to the 1 hour, even though we had a few technical difficulties and still are experiencing some, I would like to open it up to questions. You can either ask questions, unmute, or post them in the chat room if you have questions on mental health issues as we think about our students in post-secondary ed settings. Any questions for Dr. Reed? It was a great presentation, very timely, and with some examples that we hadn't seen before in thinking about ways to keep calm. So I really appreciate that. Are there any questions from the audience, or you want to type anything in the chat room if you're not able to actually talk? Got some great comments about people appreciate what you've done, Debbie, and so it was very informative and helpful. And I think
Thank you, because I can't even see the comments either. So I'm so sorry. I wish I could, and I wish I could see your faces. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's okay. And I think the alternative journaling was one that people commented that were helpful. We have posted a link in the chat room for those of you who can see it. We have posted a link for the materials, and they are also posted on our website. We will, of course, send out an evaluation after this, after we've edited along with the link to the YouTube video. So we want to make sure that you do have access. Of all things, Drew did get kicked off as well. So we're going to hope that this ends well when we do. I saw some information in the chat room. Let me just check. Marlena asked, Dr. Reed, are you finding that providers are waiving the time criteria noted in the DSM-5, given the current situation when labeling a patient as having anxiety or whatever?
I don't know about the time criteria that they're waiving. That's a very interesting point, though. I can tell you that right now, I know this is a little off question. I don't think they're waiving the time criteria. However, there are some things that the state has been waiving in terms of, like, for example, they are waiving some requirements, like with the telemental health and things of that nature. So they are being a little lenient on some of the mandatory requirements in terms of what providers can and cannot do in terms of that, how they provide services. But in terms of the DSM-5, no, that's pretty set.
And she wanted to clarify, she was meaning the length of time with symptoms. Is anything, so I think you pretty much answered that.
That's the same.
Yeah. Well, we really appreciate those of you who are hanging in there. I don't know if there are any other questions. Let's see. No, but I do see that the evaluation for the webinar has been added a couple of times. So you can see that. You can also see the materials if you are able to see the chat room, but we will also send out an evaluation, and the materials are posted on the website. You've been a great help, Dr. Reed. I really appreciate your time. So glad to hear your voice is coming back strong. And thank you all for joining us. And again, this recording, with my fingers crossed, will be on the website. And in the meantime, everyone, please stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.